What a day for Pistons basketball, man. The Pistons get a win over the Denver Nuggets, but obviously, most importantly, what happened today, Jaden Ivey was traded by the Detroit Pistons. We'll break it all down in a very busy day for Locked On Pistons.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Khahil. I've been covering the Detroit Pistons for the last 4 years, bearing credential media member over the last 3 years. And I appreciate all of you guys who help make Locked On Pistons one of the best podcasts out there, and your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Also want to thank you guys for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network, number one sports podcast network in America. Later on, we'll talk about the Detroit Pistons beating the Denver Nuggets tonight. How they played in that game. They played pretty well, especially in the first half. Are there any more moves coming for the Detroit Pistons? We'll break that down later, but everyone go ahead and get your popcorn ready. We're going to be, this is probably going to be a longer segment, this first segment. I'm going to go ahead and apologize to David Locke, Nick, my bosses. Apologize, guys, but this is probably going to be a long segment. I'll try to be fast, but it's going to be a longer segment. Today, the Detroit Pistons traded Jaden Ivey. He is going to the Chicago Bulls. This news happened around, I think, like 12:01. I was at a doctor's appointment and driving on the highway when I got the news, and I wasn't able to I was able to react to it, but I wasn't able to fully react to the trade itself, what was being sent to the Pistons, the actual details of it, until like an hour and a half afterwards. The traffic was crazy. But what ended up happening, what the trade is for the Detroit Pistons are sending Jaden Ivey to Chicago, and they are receiving, as of right now, which we'll get into in a minute, as of right now, they're getting Kevin Huerter, Dario Saric, and a first-round pick swap with the Minnesota Timberwolves, which means that the Pistons will get the better first-round pick this year of either Detroit or Minnesota. Initially, I thought it meant the Pistons had their own pick and then a first-round pick swap that the Timberwolves had. That is not the case. It's simply, it's going to be one first-round pick no matter what. It's just if the Pistons have a better pick, which probably isn't going to happen, they'll get that one. If the Timberwolves have a way better pick than them, Pistons will just take that one and the Timberwolves will take the Pistons. That's all it is. Huerter is an expiring contract, and Saric is an expiring contract. It's a part of a three-team deal, along with the Timberwolves. That part doesn't really matter. Honestly, I don't know which part I want to really start with here. I guess what I want to start with is I had been trying to tell people that the Pistons were shopping Jaden Ivey for weeks. They had, and Vincent Goodwill, thank you. He, very reputable. Hopefully people believe him, because I've been saying it, but Vince tweeted it, so I'm sure people will believe it now, that they had been shopping Ivey for weeks. I can tell you guys, as someone who, I tweeted this out earlier, I'm just saying this so people understand why they maybe should take and listen to what I'm saying here. As someone who knew about 10 minutes before Ivey got traded that this was going down, they had been, one, shopping him for weeks, and two, this was something that was really understood was going to happen since late December. People, there were fans in the fan base that thought early that he's still on a minutes restriction. That's why he's not playing a lot. And it's my understanding that at the end of December, I believe during the Western road trip, there was JB and Ivey spoke. Ivey spoke with the Pistons, and he was aware that his minutes just were not going to be what he expected them to be. Now with him back. With Caris LeVert in town, with Danis playing well, with everything going on, at that point, it was understood that he was not going to play a ton. His minutes situation, he was not going to get to where he thought he wanted to get to. They had prioritized some other guys and let him know, this is the situation you're in now. This is where we have you at. This is what we value at. And from my understanding, from that point on, I want to make it very clear. I'm not suggesting he was a cancer at all in the locker room. I'm not saying he was hated on the team at all in the locker room. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, it was clear he was unhappy. It wasn't like taking it out on his teammates. It wasn't anything like that. It was simply a guy who was unhappy, and it was known since late December, early January that he was just unhappy. And it was known that it was probably going to be better off for him to go get a new start and the Pistons to move on from him. And that had been the case since the end of December. That's where the situation was. since then. To add on to that, there's some people out there asking, why didn't the Pistons get more? Why didn't they get a better trade? They didn't get anybody great for him. This was one of your main assets. Why didn't you flip him into anything? And this is where I'll say again, I had been trying to tell people for weeks, his value, I said this on, I believe, 2 episodes ago at the end when we talked about why I had been hearing, his value was not high at all across the league. Actually, as of 24 hours ago, the day before this trade happened, I was told that there wasn't any real team right now showing legit interest in him. So I think the Bulls trade had to have come about fast. At least if that is what I heard is true, that trade had to have come about fast. So his value was not very high across the league. There were not many teams interested in him at all. And the fact that the Pistons traded him for this lets you know that the Pistons themselves did not value Ivey how some of his fans may have valued him. He had a $30 million cap hold this offseason because he's a restricted free agent. And it was likely that if they did not trade him by this deadline, he was not going to be returning anyways. They likely would have just released his cap hold and just let him walk. There was really no future, I believe, where Ivey was returning to this team, and that this team thought highly enough of Ivey where they believed he was going to be an answer or a long-term piece for this team. They had really in their head moved on, and his place on the team for the last month and a half has really just been the 9th man of a rotation. And that's where they had him at. And they spent weeks trying to find a team that maybe thought higher of him at that and try to flip him for that and try to send him somewhere where maybe he can play more and get an asset for him. But all they ended up trading him for was expiring contracts and maybe a 5-spot improvement in the draft, which tells you he didn't have much value. And this move, and this is the main part, this move was not about making the team better. This move was not if there's this fantastic player we got to trade Ivey for, this is going to make us so much better. That's not what maybe Huerter shows up and actually does play well. And maybe it does work out that way. Maybe that happens. But the motive behind this move was, we're done with Ivey. We don't think there's much of a future for him here. And in the offseason, we're probably going to let him walk. He doesn't think there's much of a future here. He's not happy with what his role is here, and he wants to move on. We're having a great year. Let's get this elephant hovering in the locker room. Let's get this, situation that's hovering around the team. Let's get it over with. Let's send him to somewhere he can play better, and let's just focus on how great of a season we're having. That was the motive behind this trade. It was not about getting better. It was not about finding this great piece out there because they couldn't find a great trade for him. All they could find was expiring contracts and a 5-spot improvement in the draft. That's what they found. And that's just the reality of the situation. Whether you disagree with it or not, that's on you to have your own opinion. But that, I'm telling you guys, that is the reality of what this situation was for the past month. And that's how we arrived at where we got to. There was no future for Jaden Ivey here. There just wasn't. And they knew that for the past month. And so did Ivey. And that's why he hadn't been as happy. He was unhappy behind the scenes. So I felt like this trade was obvious. I honestly thought there was a chance they wouldn't be able to find a team to take him and they would end up having to just let him walk. But they didn't. They were able to move on from him. And, maybe he goes on and plays well. But I will now take this time real quickly to also say, told you so. I'm gonna take my quick victory lap. That's all I'm gonna take on that. That's literally all I'll say. Cause I know some people are sensitive right now, but I'm gonna take that real quick. He struggled since he came back, and if the Pistons, this is the other thing too. I want to make sure it's clear. If the Pistons thought that he could get back to that player last year that everyone believes, a lot of his fans believe, was a really good player, if they thought that player was either 1, achievable, or 2, actually was that great of a player, they would have held on to him to the offseason, signed him back on not a bad deal, on a very cheap deal, and just said, okay, let's see if he can make that, if he can be that next year. But like I had been saying on here for weeks and months, they were never that super high on Ivey. And they did not believe that the player, even if he played similar to the player he was last year, they did not believe that archetype of player was the one they wanted next to Cade, or was that a player worth investing a ton of assets into, especially with how the team was playing without him and how they've been able to play with him basically playing as a ninth man. So all of that plays into why they decided to just make this move and say, let's get him, send him where he wants to go, where he has a chance, and let us just wipe our hands clean of this. It was time to move on. So that's on Ivey, just on him. The players, the Pistons, the players that they received, I should say. The Pistons, the reason why they made this trade, from my understanding, they didn't want to make a trade for somebody with Ivey that maybe could have taken on longer salary. They didn't want to take on long-term salary. I don't know if there was a deal even out there for it, but I know they didn't want to take on any kind of long-term salary because they are, Hunter wrote about this in his article as well, that they are already mentally in their head writing down the number that they're going to have to extend Ausar and Stu to. And they don't want any long-term salary that's making it hard on them to have flexibility in those years. I believe it's going to be 27, 28 is when their extensions kick in, that they're going to sign them to this offseason. They want to keep that slate clean. So that's why they traded for they took the expiring contracts. So they didn't have anything past this year that would have made anything tougher on them. That's one. Two, I guess I should probably save this part for later on because it goes into like the any more moves that are left. But from my understanding, well, I'll go ahead and hit on this. I'll hit on this now, and then we'll dive even more into it at the end of the podcast. The players that they traded for, Huerter and Saric, they cannot be aggregated in any more deals. And what that means is aggregating in deals means you can't take Huerter's contract and combine it with LeVert's contract to go get somebody. You can trade them again, but they have to be alone. Like you can trade Huerter by himself in a deal, and you can do that, but you can't attach his salary with another salary to go get somebody. Same thing with Saric. So if they do end up trying, and they have 2 days, they could do it, but if they want to try to flip one of these guys again, they can, but it cannot be for a larger salary. They can't combine them in Caris. They can't do anything like that. It would have to be on their own. So that's, and I guess the final point I'll hit on, I told you guys it's going to be a long segment because there's a lot of stuff that went down and a lot of stuff to talk about with this. Last thing for now, and then we'll hit on it more later, is that this trade is not finalized yet. Does that mean it's not going to happen? No, it's going to happen. It's not finalized because they have 2 days to find out if they want to expand this deal to a bigger deal and maybe reroute some of these contracts somewhere else, maybe add someone to a fourth team and try reroute some of these players and maybe get something else in return. This is the base deal they have right now, but it's not finalized yet, at least from my understanding. We haven't seen it reported to be finalized yet by the league office, which means they are leaving the door open because of these big trades with Giannis potentially happening. We just saw Harden traded. There might be a big 3-4 team deal. Teams are just keeping it out there in case they have to turn it into a larger deal and they can get other things going. So right now the Pistons could turn this into a bigger deal. Not just the Pistons, maybe the Bulls, maybe they get a fourth team that they send Kobe White to, and now that turn it's still open. Things can be added to this. It hasn't been finalized yet, so we'll see if anything else ends up happening with this overall trade package that's happened. But that's where we're at right now. Ivey is no longer a Detroit Piston. He's going to the Chicago Bulls, and the Pistons have Kevin Huerter, Dario Saric, and now a pick swap with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Khahil, where you guys are at with this trade of Jaden Ivey. Coming up, we will touch on the Pistons beating the Denver Nuggets. Honestly, you know what? I'm making an audible here. We're gonna move the Pistons beating the Nuggets all the way to the end of the podcast. Coming up, we'll talk about the any more moves and everything else we need to talk about with this deal and how this impacts everything else. I think that's more of a big deal. I'm gonna call an audible and do that. We'll dive even more into it coming up. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. The last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. But let's go ahead and talk a little more about this trade. Before we get into any more moves, I just want to make it, because this is going to be probably my last time. I'm no longer going to be talking about this player. And because the Pistons are the first seed and he's no longer on the team. So I'm not going to be hitting on this anymore after today. Unless like this deal turns into anything, turns into more. Hopefully, that's my hope. The simple fact of the matter of what happened in this situation. Ivey, when he came back, whether it was due to a surgery in the offseason, I think it probably has more to do with the knee surgery he had at the beginning of the year. Simply was not playing well enough to make the Pistons hold on to him long term. He just wasn't playing well enough. And the development of Dennis Jenkins and how well he played a part in this. He played extremely well. They're going to convert him to a roster spot within the week. How well he played off the bench at the guard position also made him even more expendable to the Pistons front office. So I think one of the things that I've seen that is most disappointing for a lot of Pistons fans is that a lot of people had it built up that if they were to trade Ivey, he was going to be like the piece, a part of like a bigger trade. Like it was going to be Ivey and a first and a big salary. And that's what, if they traded Ivey, okay, you were going to get a big deal in the return. But the reality of the situation was his value just wasn't looked at like that. And it wasn't going to be possible to do that. That's not where NBA teams looked at him as. That's not how the Pistons looked at him as at this point of the season. So I understand, because that was for a while what like it was sold as. Like, hey, if we move one of these, whatever young guy we drafted, that's going to be what gets us, that's going to be the move we make. That's going to be our big move. But that, because of where Ivey is at right now, because of where he's, whether it's injury or lack of development, that's just where he was at right now. And they took the deal. They took the best deal. I guess I should say that. They took the best deal that was possible. Trajan is not dumb. He spent a long time trying to find a good deal. If there was a better deal out there, he would have made it. Like I've seen people say, why didn't they trade him for this guy? Why didn't they just trade him for this guy? If these deals were out there, if there was a bit, Trajan would have made it. They tried. Trajan tried to find the best deal out there. This was the best. And I want to give the organization credit with this. They did right by Ivey. They did. Because every time JB got asked about Ivey, he said, we believe in him. That's our guy. We know what he's capable of. Every time anybody was asked about him, they made sure publicly to support him absolute most possible and not allow someone like me anyone who maybe heard about maybe he's unhappy or, actually it's not a minutes restriction, they're just not playing him. Even if any of that stuff, even with that stuff being true, they weren't going to allow that to be something they encouraged or something they supported publicly, because they were trying their best to protect him, because they did care about him as a person, and everyone seemed to really like him. So they did right by him. They did their best to cover for him publicly, even if they were having private conversations with him and they knew what was going on. They all still very much supported him publicly, and they got him a chance to go on and be and play somewhere else to get the chance to be the player he thinks he could potentially be. I think the organization did right by him. They supported him every bit of the way through. They supported him publicly. They talked highly of him. They supported him at every turn. And now that both sides seem like they wanted to move on, they send him somewhere where hopefully he gets a chance to prove where he can be. I think the organization did right by him. Now, is there any other moves to be made? There definitely are other moves coming. Something else has to happen. The Pistons are currently sitting at 16 contracts. That's important because you can only have 15 contracts on your guaranteed contracts on your roster, right? That's one of the reasons why this trade wasn't finalized before tonight, because if it was finalized before tonight, the Pistons would have had to waive somebody for the roster. So you can't have 16 people on a roster and play. You have to get it to 15. Along with that, they also need to create a roster spot for Danis. So you're really having to make two moves. You can't, you have to make either two, you have to release two guys or release someone and then make a 2v1 trade. Something else has to happen because they don't have enough spots to give Danis a guaranteed roster spot, and that is happening. They are going to give Danis a guaranteed roster spot for the rest of the year, and then they'll talk with him in the offseason, it sounds like, for a longer-term deal. So another deal is coming. Or, I take that back. Another move is coming. Now, does that mean another big time, or big time is a choice, another trade, let's just say, is happening? I'm not sure. What they can do, if they just want to go this route, they could be what I will call boring. If they wanted to do this, they could just release Isaac Jones and then release Dario Saric, who's getting paid $5 million, and just eat his money for the rest of this year to create that open roster spot for Danis Jenkins. And that's the end of the Pistons deadline. That could be all they do. There's a chance that is what they do, but I also I said this in the last podcast, I also have been had the understanding that they have been looking to move or looking at the market for Caris LeVert as well. Now, I know JB Biggerstaff said before today's game that Caris is going to be a big part of what they do down the stretch. And maybe the deadline ends, he's still on the team, and he ends up being the case. That ends up being the case. I'm not saying he's lying. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is, go back just 2 minutes ago where I just said that they supported Ivey publicly and wouldn't confirm any of this stuff that was being said and people were knowing about. They did not allow that to creep into the locker room. They didn't want to leak anything. They want to keep everything close to the chest. So just keep that in mind. JB is going to support his guys. That does not mean that they're untradeable. That's one. Two, what I have been told over the last week or so is that there isn't this great market for LeVert either. He hasn't played great for the Pistons, and he has a guaranteed number for next season as well. So I think they're going to try and continue to see, hey, is there a way we can maybe move LeVert? Maybe in one of the, if Giannis gets traded, maybe they're a fourth team and his salary gets involved. Or maybe another bigger deal happens and his salary gets involved. Whatever it is, I think that's probably like the most likely route if the Pistons do make a trade. It will be like as a third or fourth team in one of these bigger name deals. That's why I would just assume. But I know that if there's an opportunity to clean this guard room up even more and maybe get something else for Caris, they'll take that. They'll do that if it's out there, if it's a good deal. The problem is, much like I was hearing about Ivey over the last week, there wasn't a great deal. There wasn't a great want for him. There's not a lot of value for him. So a lot of the deals just haven't been really worth it from the Pistons' perspective. So if they don't end up trading Caris and they don't end up making another deal, simply because other teams just don't really value him and don't really want him, I do think they're going to continue to try. They're going to continue to look in the market. They're definitely not done. They have to make a move, but they will be active still and listen to anything that's out there. And especially, like I said earlier, wait to see if this deal can be expanded upon and see if they can create an extra roster spot with that way. They still have a ton of flexibility. They have a ton of ways to be able to do stuff. They're not capped at all. If they want to do something, they still can. It's just a matter of, do teams want what they're offering, and can they find someone to take what they're offering or what they have to get what they want? Like that, it takes two to tango, like I said in the last podcast, and I don't know if they're going to be able to define that with Caris. And that, I think, is something we can talk about in a future podcast, because I think that provides, or causes, I should say, an interesting situation down the stretch of this season with the rotation and what you do then if Caris is still on this team. We'll talk about the Denver game coming up, but like, he was a -8 in this game and a 3-point win for the Pistons. They were up by like 20 at one point. And he was a -9. He has not been good for the Pistons for a while. Like, he has been pretty bad since like the first 2-3 weeks of his season. He's been just flat out bad. They really need to find a way to move him. They just do. They need to find a way to move him by the deadline. I'm interested to see if they're able to. If they don't, I think it causes some interesting and maybe uncomfortable decisions with the rotation. But let me know, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Khahil, where you guys stand with all of this. If there's anything else, I feel like I hit on every angle of this trade that they made. and where they sit right now. If there's any angle that I didn't hit on that you guys want me to go further on or answer, I tried to hit every angle, but if there's anything else, let me know in the comment section, or you guys can tweet at me over at Khahil. I'll try to answer all the questions and give you guys everything that you guys need with this. But coming up, we'll briefly touch on the Pistons win. This is a pretty good win, really good win actually, over the Denver Nuggets. We'll break it down coming up. New year, new systems. This is the time where a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communication is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing ever gets missed. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can keep your existing number. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers with Quo. Now I've got to tell you guys about another one of our sponsors, if I can just pull it up right here real quick. Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pulled up the Game Time app, picked an upcoming NBA game, and you can have tickets locked within minutes. Love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Great last-minute options as well, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today, and remember it's gametime.co, not .com, with Game Time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcasts. Oh, hold on. I just got a Shams update notification. What is it? Oh, it's just... Shams got to stop with this. Just these continued... He'll tweet a breaking news and then just continue to tweet and more on this trade and more on this trade. Like, bro, come on, bro. This is about James Harden. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. All right, so the Pistons, moving away from all the trade talk, they did have a game same day. It was a very busy day in the Pistons world. They did have a game, and this was a rematch against the Denver Nuggets. This time, Nikola Jokic was healthy, and he was playing in this game. And this was the game against the Nuggets last week that I said that I thought the Pistons played very poorly. They should not be happy with how they played, and they got away with one. And that was the one I lit them up. Even though they won by, I think, 2 points? I said that they played very poorly, and they shouldn't have against a team that didn't have Jokic, that didn't have Aaron Gordon, that didn't have, they were missing, I think, Christian Brown as well. They were without 2 other starters. And I lit them up for it. I said they did not play well. They should have won this game easily. The fact that they almost lost it and then fouled a 3-point shooter twice down the line was terrible. They came out in this game and made sure that wasn't going to happen, especially in the first half. First half, they were completely dominant against the Denver Nuggets. It was one of the best halves that they've played on the season in general. They were absolutely fantastic. They outscored, they were up 69-50. 69-50 in the first half. They were fantastic. Ausar was all over the place defensively. Cade Cunningham was fantastic offensively. 17 points and 6 of 11 shooting in the first half. 7 assists. Duncan Robinson was scorching hot. He couldn't hit any shots last game against the Denver Nuggets. He was 4-4 from 3 in the first half of this one. Jalen Duren almost had a double-double in the first half. 9 points, 9 rebounds. I mean, they absolutely took it to the Denver Nuggets in the first half of this game. I mean, they set the tone. They were dominating them on defense. Their defense was absolutely suffocating them. 50 points and a half to the Denver Nuggets with Jokic. I mean, they were all over the place. Then in the second half, it cooled down. Obviously, they ended up only winning by 3. It was not great in the second half for the Detroit Pistons, but they held on to the win, and that's all that matters. They played much better in this game. Need to be a little bit more, I would say, locked in the second half. But when you build yourself that type of lead, you have those kind of margins to work with. And they were able to close it out. Again, fantastic game from Cade, 29 and 10. Very efficient game, 29 and 19 shots. Duren with 19 and 13. Duncan had 23 and 2. How many threes did he hit? He hit 6 threes. Yeah, 6 threes in this game. Ausar with 10, 6, 3, 2, and 1. Isaiah Stewart with some impactful defensive plays. Ron Holland in that second quarter had some really impactful minutes with a chase down block. He banked in a 3. He had a nice steal when Jokic turned his back. Then he had a really tough finish in transition as well. Had some really impactful minutes. Those guys played, even Javonte Green in the second half. He had a very key 3-pointer in the fourth quarter at the end of this game that helped put the Pistons up multiple possessions where things started to get a little too close. So they made plays when they needed to close the game out. They played well. They beat Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. They also built themselves quite the lead in the first half from dominating them, and they held on in the clutch at the end. They've been really good in the clutch this year. They continue to win games in the clutch, and they did that here against the Denver Nuggets. They're now 37 and 12, right? Yeah, 37 and 12. Heading into the week of in the week of the trade deadline, just absolutely absurd season by the Detroit Pistons. There is something that I want to hit on real quickly because someone actually did. It was Vince Goodwill, who we already brought up on the podcast once. He asked JB about this. I've been waiting for someone to ask about this so we can get some kind of answer. He asked about JB subbing out Ausar Thompson and bringing in another offensive player late. He asked him about it, and JB basically said that he feels like when Ausar is out there late at times, defenses try to double Cade, and he feels like if they get another ball handler on the floor, they can't really do that, and they want to free up the court for Cade. He says that, hey, if our defense is like playing lights out and we're generating stops and getting, out in the open floor, then I'll probably ride with Ausar in that point. But I try to, on the flow of the game, I decide who I want to go with and do I want to focus on offense or focus on defense. I'm glad. First of all, I want to say I'm very glad that someone finally asked him so we could at least get his. We could speculate, but I'm glad we finally got to hear his answer for why he does this. He's been doing this. 2, I think it's just blatantly. I think it's just an incorrect way to go about things. The Pistons. I'll say this. If the Pistons had like this great offensive option to go to that actually elevated their offense, if they actually had that, and that's why they decide, sometimes if we have that guy, we can get him on the floor and our offense will just elevate. Our defense may take a hit, but our offense will elevate so far, it'll make up for it. Then it would make sense. But much like last year, and it's been the same case this year, in this fourth quarter when they first of all, they only played Ausar like a minute in the middle of the fourth quarter before subbing him back out. If you're not going to play him late, play him early in the fourth quarter, at least reap the benefits of that, and then sub him out late. That would be a better handle of the situation. But they sub him out, and much like it happened in the playoffs, their offense, the players they're bringing in for Ausar for this offensive team, they're not good enough offensive players to actually elevate the offense. And the offense never actually does well. They subbed Ausar out. They get 2 turnovers. They don't make a field goal for the next 2.5 minutes. And then they don't get a stop. They go from being up 9 to only being up 2 and calling a timeout. The problem the reason why this is, I really don't think it's ever really worked for the Pistons. I can't think of a situation where it actually did work to where they ended up winning the game, but did the move help them win the game? No, it made it harder. It would work. Again, it would work. And it would make sense if you were taking Ausar out to play Norman Powell, or if you were taking him out to play 6 man of the year scorer type. Like if you're bringing someone who's pick your 6 man of the year guy, whatever. If you're bringing him in for that guy and he's actually that player himself elevates your offense, then it makes sense. Because then, okay, or at least the half court offense is going to get better. You're actually going to score in the half court. You'll keep up. Okay. Bring in Dennis, who I don't think played a very good game in this game, but even still. Dennis, while we like him, he's a backup guard, and he's not the type of player that's elevating the offense himself. They don't have a player like that. So what you're doing is, when you take Ausar out for these theoretical offensive players at the end of the game, teams are still playing gap help against those guys. Like, watch in this game. Go back and watch the fourth quarter. Denver is still playing off of Dennis in the gaps against Cade. It's not, like, just because you bring out someone who's willing to shoot the three doesn't mean that teams are going to respect them like they're J.J. Redick. Teams are still going to play them the same way. They're still going to help in the gaps because they don't think they're going to make them pay. And then you end up turning the ball over like they did. They end up not scoring enough offensively still, with that being the point of the adjustment. And now, on the other end, you're allowing Jamal Murray, who was 2 of 9, by the way, with Ausar on the floor. 2 of 9 in this game with Ausar on the floor. You're allowing Jamal Murray now to get off and score some points. Get them back in the game. He scored 9 points in the fourth quarter alone with Ausar off the floor. He was clamped throughout the whole game. Now you're not scoring because you're not really bringing in enough offense to make up the difference. And now you just don't have your defense. And now the point of attack is just blown. Jamal's getting off, and now it's a 2-point game. That's why when he makes these adjustments or makes that substitution, it drives me insane, and I feel like it's going to cost the Pistons a playoff game or two. Because they just don't your defense is the identity of the team. That's what feeds your offense. If you want to go in the offseason and acquire somebody that is like a 6-man lethal scorer for situations like that, okay, then it will make sense to do so. Now you're actually reaping the benefits of what you're trying to do. Right now, and last year and right now, you don't have that personnel that actually gives you the benefit that you're trying to go for. You don't have it. And now you're just hurting yourself on both ends of the floor. Because now you're not getting stops or creating transition offense. Now you're just stuck in the half court, and your half court's still going to be bad. So it's very frustrating. I didn't like his answer at all. It's frustrating. I think it's going to hurt the Pistons in the playoffs if that's what they do. But let me know, comment section down below, or over on Twitter at Khahil, where you guys are at with the whole trade situation, where they stand in the trade market, and then obviously how you felt about this game. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Till next time, I'll see you guys later, and peace out, everybody.